If you're considering buying a mixer for scratching in the $500 to $1,000 range, then you're probably looking at these two mixers in your shortlist. The Numark Scratch, which has been out for a few years, and the Pioneer DJ DJM-S5, which at the time of recording this has just come out. They're both around that price point. They're both superficially at least the same, because you've got your flat area around the bottom with not many controls for scratching, the classic Scratch layout if you like, same at the top. And they both got the kind of stripped down 4 pads in the middle, as opposed to no pads on non-Scratch mixers and 8 pads on more expensive Scratch mixers. So not only they're in the same price bracket, but they kind of look similar as well. So it's unsurprising that you would have these two on your list. So on the face of it, either would do the job, right? Well, yes, but there are key differences here, and it's certainly worth knowing them before you decide which one to buy. So in this video, we'll talk through 9 key differences. It's not a substitute for getting to know them better, and you can do that by looking at the Digital DJ Tips full reviews and review videos of these. I'll show you where to find those at the end. But for now, let's get stuck right in with our list of 9 differences between these two things. So the first difference, you can't see it, but you'll certainly feel it in your wallet. The Numark Scratch is $500 and the Pioneer DJ DJM-S5 is $800. So you're paying more than half again for the DJM-S5. We'll come back to that point at the end, but everything else we're going to talk about now, you have to see through the lens of the fact that yes, they're both budget mixers, but they are also slightly different when it comes to that price point, and that could be a big consideration for you. So the second thing is that the DJM-S5 has got better Serato performance pad controls. So the Numark Scratch has got 3 pad modes: cue, sample and roll, for controlling those 3 things. And you can control 4 pad slots, as you can see with this, but they're very limited, right? And also this isn't plugged in, but if it were, you'd see that the pads are not RGB. They don't give you the full color gamut, so they don't reflect the colors that the pads are set to in the software, for instance. Over here, the pads are not only bigger, but they also give full control over all the juicy things that you've got on the pads in Serato: hot cue, roll, auto loop, sampler, gate cue, cue loop, save loop, and scratch bank. And they're also RGB, giving you that feedback as well. So overall then, even though both are limited, you are getting better control over Serato's pad functions with the DJM-S5 than with the Numark Scratch. So let's move on to our third point, which we kind of touched on a little bit there, which is basically just that the layout is a little bit better on the DJM-S5 over the Numark Scratch. And that's mainly a function of the fact that it's bigger. So there's not much in it, to be honest. They're both fine for scratching on, but if you've got big hands or if you're clumsy, you might just prefer the DJM-S5. And it also has the full size paddles that you get on the DJM-S7 and the DJM-S11, as opposed to this kind of smaller compact paddles, which still do the job fine, but they're not the full size ones that you get over here on this. Now, the next thing is about looping. Now, the looping is controlled in a couple of ways on Serato and on this kind of mixers. One of the ways is with the pads, we've already talked about those, but another way is with physical loop controls. So auto loop on the DJM-S5 is pretty useless. It's a shift function of these buttons here, and you get no parameters at all that you can adjust. On the Numark Scratch, you have a dedicated loop control per side, which is an encoder with a click on it that does basically all the functions that you would expect a dedicated loop control to do. So it's also worth pointing out while we're here that the loop controls on the Numark Scratch double up as library controls. So you hold down the shift button and then you can select tracks and load tracks by using these controls. Whereas over here, the library controls are actually better because you get a browse encoder here with the press, but you also get the full set of buttons for view and prepare and so on, which is what you'd expect. So whereas this one wins on having the physical loop controls, this one wins on having those browse controls. Now, there are differences in the crossfader control as well, and these are pluses and minuses on both units, but it is worth noting what they are. So on the Numark Scratch, we have a crossfader reverse button, and a crossfader slope button to make the crossfader tight or smooth. So these are very standard, you know, to have these buttons, a minimum of those 2 buttons on a Scratch mixer. Over here though, we don't get those at all. Over here, there's no buttons for that. They're actually features of the pads, so you have to hold down Shift and press the pad to select those things. So it's not really a big issue, but at least here you can see what's set on the crossfader controls. So yeah, that might be something that you're interested in having a physical control for. That said, on the front of this one, we have a crossfader adjust control, which adjusts the tightness of the crossfader, and that's something you don't get at all over here. They're both very nice crossfaders. It's an inner fader and a mag fail fader there, but the tightness of the fader is very easy to adjust on the S5, not so on the Numark Scratch. So differences in the crossfader controls for sure. Also differences in the build quality. This is all metal, including the sides, whereas this one, plastic sides, metal top plate and back. It's not really a big deal, to be honest with you. If you look up the range in the Pioneer DJ equipment line up to the DJM-S5 and the S11, even the CDJ 3000s, they've all got this hybrid plastic metal build, and no one ever complains about the build quality. But Pioneer DJ's DJM-900 Nexus 2, for instance, is all metal. This isn't, and this one here is, just to bear in mind. So now let's talk about the way the effects are implemented. And again, the slightly bigger, slightly more expensive model more or less wins out here. So neither mixer has got any hardware effects on board. In other words, if you unplug your computer and just leave your decks plug in and try to play records, you can't use any of the effects on them, except the filters. The filters are there on both as hardware filters. At $500, no onboard effects, not really a biggie. At $800 though, maybe you're starting to expect onboard effects there. So the effects here are fixed, same as here. You can change them in the software. I'm pretty sure you can change them in the software here, actually. I'm not 100% about that, I'll be honest with you. But they're pretty limited generally on Scratch mixers. The idea is you get access to the 6 effects, and then whichever effect you've got chosen works on both channels at once. It's the way Scratch mixers are configured, gives you immediacy rather than really deep effects control. And you get the wet dry on both. But the big difference is you get the beats control over here on the hardware buttons, which you haven't got here. So you can make the effect run for half a beat or 2 beats or whatever you want. Here you can't. You've got to do that in the software. And that might be a very big thing for you, to have the beats controls on the unit, and you don't get that there. So this one also has 2 new effects of its own. It has Crossfader hot cue, which lets you select a cue and then cut in like this. It's a bit like the gate cue. And it also has a Scratch training function on it, which is pretty cool, bit gimmicky maybe, but if it's something that attracted you to this, you're not getting any of that at all over here. So another thing to talk about is the difference in the inputs and outputs on these units. They're quite similar. There's not an awful lot in it, but there is one kind of big change that you get when you move up to the S5 over the Numark Scratch that's worth looking at. So if we take a peek around the back of the units, with the DJM-S5, you can plug in an auxiliary input over and above what you've got going on your 2 decks. It's only controlled by simple volume control around the front, but it is there, and you don't get any auxiliary at all on the Numark Scratch. However, the Numark Scratch has balanced and unbalanced master outputs, whereas over on the Pioneer DJM-S5, you only get a balanced master output, and your unbalanced output is reserved for the booth. This also has a booth output, of course. Also note that while both have got microphone inputs, the microphone input on the Numark Scratch has got a tone control as well as a volume control, whereas you only get a volume control for the microphone over on the DJM-S5. Another thing worth pointing out here that you can't see by looking at the units is that the DJM-S5 has got a system built in so that you can use the microphone when you're live streaming. So if you're using the laptop that you're DJing with as a live stream laptop, and you want to also use like OBS on that in order to put the whole thing out to Twitch or whatever, the DJM-S5 can send the microphone channel up there the same way it sends the music up to OBS. You can't do that on the Numark Scratch. It hasn't got the microphone channel routed through the USB. It only comes out through the back. So worth bearing in mind if that's something that you like to do. It's becoming more common on DJ gear nowadays to give you the option to do that. So the next thing I want to point out is that they are powered differently. Yes, they might be full-sized or at least compact full-size mixers where you just expect to plug them into the mains. Not the case. Again, let's have a look around the back and see what the difference is. So on this one here, the power is provided by USB-C. So we can plug it directly into our laptop and it can actually take power from your laptop and work that way. Or, and we've tested this, you can plug a power bank in and power it from a power bank, so you could take it up a hill and DJ with it, or just plug in a USB cable to a power adapter to power this thing. So it's the first mixer, first piece of DJ gear I can think of ever that we've seen with USB power. Obviously it's going to be the future, but not seen that on a mixer before. You need to provide your own power adapter. This one here is standard. You get the IEC, or otherwise known as a kettle lead, to plug in there, straight into the mains, transformer on board, the same way that all pro mixers work. But it's worth pointing that out. It might be that you prefer this. You don't want to mess around with adapters and silly little leads, you know. You just want a big, thick kettle cable to plug in, whereas this one here is going to give you the versatility of USB-C. So that's the differences between the two of them. Which one should you go for? And that's the big question. And I think it comes down to why you're buying a scratch mixer in the first place. If you're buying a scratch mixer because what you want is something that you can scratch with at home, you can enjoy scratching, you can have fun, and not really worry about anything past pretty good feature set, which is you get on the Numark Scratch, which is what you get here, then the Numark Scratch could be the right one for you. If you want to buy a mixer that you can do a lot more on, then, well, this is the one. But, and here's the but, this might frustrate you because it's teasing you with a lot of these features, but you haven't got the full-size pads and you haven't got some of the stuff you get on the bigger ones. This isn't even trying to do that. This is just saying cheap, cheerful, simple, well-built, does the job, feels nice, but it doesn't even attempt to be kind of like, if you like, pro. Whereas the S5 does attempt to be pro, but it's a little bit frustrating. And I guess it has to be because it has to fit into the product line. You've got the S5, the S7 and the S11, and you're stepping up in the feature set. If you think that in the future you're going to upgrade, then it probably is a good idea to consider seriously getting the cheapest scratch mixer you can to start with, of which the Numark Scratch is definitely that. It's the cheapest Serato scratch mixer by quite a long way, actually by about $300 on the market. Because why spend more? But if you think that you are not going to upgrade, it might be worth, if you want to just have a play with some of the extra features, going for the S5 and sticking with it. But look, this is going to be cheaper to buy, cheaper to sell, and then if later on you want to buy like the S7 or the S11 to get the full pro feature set, that might be the better route for you, to go this first and then upgrade to fully professional rather than starting on semi-professional. Of course, it's going to come down to budget as well. 300 difference is quite a big difference between the two mixes, so that's something you're going to want to consider too. Now, a couple of things to close off with. Firstly, do go and look at the full reviews. We've got them for you on Digital DJ Tips. I'll show you how to get them now. Head over to the digitaldjtips.com website, click on reviews at the top, and then select DJ gear and then select mixers, DJ mixers, and then you'll see all our mixer reviews at the top. There's the DJM-S5, which is currently the latest mixer that we've reviewed, but it won't take you very long to scroll down to find the Numark Scratch review as well. And in there you'll find a full written review and also a video review of each of these units, which will show you them plugged in and show you them in use and give you an idea of some of the features of them that we haven't had time to cover in this short piece. But the second thing I want to do is point you towards our Scratching for Controller DJs course. So if you've bought one of these, or you're thinking of buying one of these, but you want to be trained, well, the best place to be trained is, of course, with us, the biggest online DJ school in the world. Again, head to the Digital DJ Tips website, click DJ courses at the top, and then in the complete courses section, look at Scratching for Controller DJs. And in here, you'll find everything you need to learn to scratch from beginner all the way up to literally DMC Pro standards. We've got teaching in here from Steve Canuetto, DJ Angelo and other DJs showing you how it's done. So do go and take a look at that course. It's extremely popular and for good reason. It's a phenomenal investment in your scratching, covering scratching on everything from the cheapest controllers all the way up to pro systems. So I hope you found this video useful. This has been the digital DJ tips comparison of these two units, the DJM-S5 from Pioneer DJ and the Numark Scratch. Do go and take a look at those reviews if you're thinking of spending this kind of big money on one of these units. Meanwhile, from me here in the studio, get good, get out there, make the moments, and we'll see you again very soon.